On April 23, 2026, the National Weather Service in Green Bay issued a flash flood warning for an imminent failure of the Big Falls Dam on the Little Wolf River in Waupaca County. The warning was direct and without qualification. If you are in low-lying areas near or below this dam, move to higher ground immediately. The warning was valid until 4:15 p.m. That was the beginning. What followed over the next 4 days was the most significant flood emergency Wisconsin has seen in years. A cascading sequence of overflowing rivers, mandatory evacuations, closed highways, activated National Guard soldiers, a state of emergency declaration from Governor Tony Evers, and a near-record crest on the Wisconsin River that brought the water to within fractions of a foot of the highest level ever recorded. Communities that had never flooded before found water in their streets. Towns that knew flooding as a periodic risk found it at levels that exceeded what their emergency planning had modeled. And a levee system near Portage came under a pressure that its designers had built for, but that, until this week, had never actually arrived. At the peak of the crisis, evacuation orders were in effect across multiple counties. Wisconsin Task Force 1, the state's urban search and rescue team, was deployed. The State Emergency Operations Center was elevated to active status. Interstate 39, one of Wisconsin's major north-south corridors, required emergency sandbagging at the Highway 33 interchange. A neighborhood in Portage was accessible only by boat. Approximately 1,800 residents in Waupaca County and another 1,000 in Shiocton were under active evacuation orders simultaneously. As of April 18th, floodwaters on the Wisconsin River near Portage are beginning to recede. The immediate emergency is easing. The recovery has not yet begun. The flooding did not arrive from a single catastrophic storm. It arrived from days of accumulated rainfall that saturated the ground, filled the rivers faster than they could drain, and overwhelmed levee systems designed for conditions that this spring's rainfall exceeded across multiple drainage basins simultaneously. The sequence began April 13th and 14, when overnight thunderstorms dropped nearly 4 inches of rain across northeast and north-central Wisconsin in a matter of hours. The rain was part of a broader, severe weather system that produced tornado damage in Waukesha, Kenosha, Racine, Marquette, and Walworth counties. National Weather Service teams were surveying possible tornado touchdowns in those counties, while simultaneously tracking flood emergencies developing across multiple river systems to the north and east. In Madison, residents cleaned up from a severe storm that cracked car windshields, broke windows, and downed trees. The storm that produced these conditions was extensive in both its geographic reach and the variety of damage it caused, from wind damage in the Milwaukee suburbs to dam failure warnings in Waupaca County. The National Weather Service tracked at least 5 rivers in Wisconsin simultaneously at or forecast to reach major flood stage. The Green Bay Fire Department urged residents near the East River to prepare to evacuate. Schools in Clintonville canceled classes as officials monitored conditions upstream, and the water table failed to absorb additional precipitation on already saturated ground. In Brown County, Green Bay school bus routes were impacted by flooding. The village of Suamico reported multiple road closures and standing water. Communities that had spent weeks in normal spring conditions suddenly found their drainage infrastructure overwhelmed. The Big Falls Dam on the Little Wolf River in Waupaca County triggered the most urgent warning of the opening days. An imminent failure notice from the National Weather Service, with emergency management warning of possible life-threatening flash flooding downstream along the Little Wolf River. The warning was valid until 4:15 p.m. on April 14th, meaning officials had hours to work with, not days. The Weyauwega Area Fire Department began evacuations downstream of the dam before the warning had expired. Their statement captured both the speed of the situation and its seriousness. Due to the risk of dam failure, evacuation operations had started along the Wolf River. There was no time for measured assessment. Residents in designated areas were told to leave while the roads were still passable. Residents on Guth Road, Kurth Drive, Deerhaven Road, Ona Pines Road, and County Highway F near Gills Landing were ordered to seek higher ground and take their medications, pets, identification documents, cell phones, and essential items. The Waupaca County Sheriff's Office posted maps of the affected areas on social media. The fire department's message to residents who chose to stay was unambiguous. Your safety cannot be guaranteed. It is highly recommended you evacuate. By April 15th, the scope of the crisis had expanded dramatically. The village of Shiocton in Outagamie County issued a large-scale evacuation for all residents within the village limits, effective by 3 p.m. that afternoon. The Red Cross opened an emergency shelter at the Black Creek Community Center at 507 South Maple Street. The evacuation order was described by officials as precautionary but serious, language that emergency managers use when they cannot fully predict the crest but cannot risk people being stranded if it comes higher than expected. New London, in Waupaca County, issued its own evacuation order for residents of low-lying areas near the Wolf River. The city's Pearl Street Bridge closed. The Shawano Street Bridge closed. No detour was available. New London Police Chief Josh Wilson addressed the public directly. Keep travel to emergent or necessary travel only. Avoid the areas downtown. Those are the areas most affected by the flooding. Photographs taken by residents on April 15th and 16 showed downtown New London flooded along the Wolf River. Water covering streets that had been dry 2 days earlier, sandbag volunteers filling bags until the supply ran out and emergency management had to call for more bags from Iowa. An estimated 1,800 to 800 people were under active evacuation notices in Waupaca County by Wednesday afternoon, with approximately 1,000 additional residents under a separate order in Shiocton. Shelters were established at Washington Center Gym at 500 West Washington Street in New London and at the Weyauwega Community Center at 105 East Main Street in Weyauwega. Volunteers came out in large numbers. In New London, dozens of people filled sandbags along the Wolf River to protect homes and businesses. One volunteer, Addison Mitchell, said her group had filled 200 or 300 bags and had to stop when they ran out of material. They had to bring some from Iowa or something, she told reporters. The Webfooters water ski team in Fremont, whose practice area sits along the Wolf River in downtown Fremont, came out to protect their facilities. As a club here, we've been affected, said member Bruce Lenable. We're actually down here trying to address some issues with our stage right now. AccuWeather's forecast for Friday night and into Saturday included additional chances for showers and thunderstorms moving through. Wisconsin and Michigan warning that the flood threat was likely to get worse before it got better. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation issued statewide caution for drivers and noted that due to the potential for more rainfall, additional areas could be impacted as conditions changed. By April 16th, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation had closed multiple highways throughout northeast and north-central Wisconsin. A list of state highway closures in Manitowoc County and surrounding areas created significant navigational challenges that compounded the difficulty of the emergency response. Roads that had been used to direct evacuees away from flooding were themselves becoming inaccessible as the water continued rising. WisDOT issued a statewide advisory urging caution, noting that additional areas could be impacted as conditions changed over coming hours and days. In Portage, Wisconsin Department of Transportation crews were sandbagging a 2-mile stretch of Interstate 39 at the Highway 33 exit. The operation, crews working to protect a major interstate highway from rising river water flowing out of a levee system under strain, captured how far the flooding had expanded from riverbanks into the surrounding landscape. Floodwaters had covered Lake Road south of the Blackhawk neighborhood. The Blackhawk neighborhood itself was completely flooded and accessible only by boat. What had been a residential street 2 days earlier was now navigable only by watercraft. The Caledonia Levee system south of Highway 33 was the central engineering concern of the crisis. The Wisconsin DNR issued a press release on April 17th, describing the situation in terms that left no ambiguity. Local officials were responding to historic flooding, water levels were placing significant strain on levee systems, and there was direct concern regarding the integrity of the Caledonia Levee. For safety reasons, the DNR said, residents in the Blackhawk subdivision area should evacuate immediately while the road remains passable. Columbia County Emergency Management issued the mandatory evacuation order. Portage fire. Chief Troy Haas stated clearly, emergency vehicles including police, fire, and EMS will not be able to reach residents. A reception center was opened in the Portage City Hall basement at 115 West Pleasant Street for those who needed shelter. Levees are engineered structures built to hold water back from areas that would otherwise flood during high river events. They are designed with specific flood tolerances. They are built for the 100-year flood or the 500-year flood, depending on the risk assessment for the area they protect. When a river rises to near record levels and holds there for hours, the pressure on the levee is not just about the water height. It is about the duration. Water soaking into the earthen berm behind the levee, finding weak points in the material, building pressure in ways that can produce failure not at the moment of highest crest, but in the hours after. This is the specific scenario that kept crews sandbagging and monitoring through the night. Wisconsin DNR said crews sandbagged a 2-mile stretch of I-39 at the Highway 33 exit as part of the broader effort to reinforce the approaches to the levee system. The levees continued to be monitored 24 hours a day, with crews working to extend sandbag blockades as the river held near its peak. Wisconsin Task Force 1, the state's urban search and rescue team, was activated and deployed to the Portage area. The team evacuated one person directly from a flooded area, assessed the situation by speaking with 164 residents, and identified 6 blocked roads for emergency management mapping. Columbia County Health and Human Services activated a well water testing program. Private wells contacted by floodwater can be contaminated, and residents whose wells had been submerged were urged to call 608-742-9227 or check Columbia County's website for testing information before resuming use of their water supply. By the morning of April 18th, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources reported that the Wisconsin River at Portage had peaked at 20.47 feet on Friday afternoon and was beginning to recede. As of 1 p.m. Saturday, the river's water level had dropped to 19.9 feet, still at major flood stage, still well above normal, but moving in the right direction for the first time since the rain began. The peak had come within 19/100ths of a foot, less than the width of 2 adult fingers, of the all-time record of 20.66 feet. The levee held. The sandbag operations along Interstate 39 held. The Caledonia Levee, south of Highway 33, did not fail. In emergency management, the margin between the levee held and the levee failed sometimes comes down to fractions of measurement, and in Portage in April 2026, the fraction was 19/100ths of a foot. Governor Evers declared a state of emergency in response to the flooding and severe weather impacts across Wisconsin, activating the full resources of Wisconsin emergency management and elevating the state Emergency Operations Center to active status. The governor visited National Guard soldiers supporting flood response efforts in Columbia County. The State Emergency Operations Center issued regular public briefings through the Ready Wisconsin website, which maintained a running log of updates, road closures, evacuation orders, and guidance for residents on accessing assistance. The site also included warnings about disaster-related fraud, the contractors and scammers who appear after every major flood event offering fake rebuilding services, fraudulent flood-proofing deals, and investment opportunities targeting people whose property has just been damaged or destroyed. Evacuation orders in Waupaca County remained active as of April 18th. Governor Evers visited flood-stricken Shiocton, where the full village evacuation had displaced approximately 2,000 residents. Donations were being accepted to help those affected. Multiple communities were still waiting for the green light to return as officials needed to assess roads, check structural integrity of homes that had been submerged, and confirm that water levels in secondary drainages had dropped sufficiently for safe reoccupancy. The April 2026 Wisconsin floods unfolded in a pattern that emergency managers have seen before and will see again. An accumulation of rainfall over several days, saturated soil that can absorb no more water, rivers that rise faster than their historical averages suggested they would, and a cascade of decisions: when to warn, when to order evacuation, when to sandbag, when to activate the National Guard, when to declare a state of emergency, that have to be made with incomplete information about how high the water will actually go. The specific decision framework that Wisconsin's emergency managers worked within over these 4 days is worth understanding, because it explains both what happened and why the outcomes were as good as they were given the circumstances. When the National Weather Service issued the flash flood warning for the Big Falls Dam on April 14th, they were working from rainfall totals, river gauge readings, and dam structural assessments in real time. The warning was issued before the dam failed. It was based on the risk that failure was imminent, not on confirmation that failure had already occurred. This is the correct approach in flash flood emergencies. Waiting for confirmation of failure before warning downstream residents is not an option when the downstream communities have minutes to move to higher ground rather than hours. The warning on April 14th gave residents time to evacuate while roads were still passable. That timing was the difference. The same logic applied in Portage on April 17th. The DNR's mandatory evacuation order for the Blackhawk neighborhood was issued before the river crested, not after. Fire Chief Haas's warning that emergency vehicles would not be able to reach residents who stayed was issued while roads were still passable, not after they had flooded. The evacuation was precautionary in the sense that the levee had not yet failed, but it was not optional, and it was not cautious in the pejorative sense. It was the emergency management system working correctly, putting residents in position to be safe before the scenario required them to be. The sandbagging operations, involving hundreds of volunteers in New London who ran out of bags and needed supplies from Iowa, involving state DOT crews protecting Interstate 39, involving the 2-mile sandbag line protecting the Highway 33 interchange, represent a form of community response that is difficult to organize and impossible to fake. Volunteers who fill 300 sandbags in a single afternoon, not because it is their property they are protecting, but because someone near them needs help, are doing something that emergency management plans depend on but cannot mandate. The levee system that held near Portage was built to hold. The people who sandbagged it through the night were the reason it held at its tested limit rather than failing at a level below it. These two facts are not separate. Engineering and labor are the same system. For residents whose properties are in areas that flooded, the days ahead will involve assessing what the water left behind. Wisconsin Emergency Management has urged residents in evacuated areas not to return until officials confirm it is safe to do so, not because of continuing flood risk, but because of the structural and public health concerns that follow flooding. Homes that have been submerged can have compromised foundations, electrical systems that have been in contact with water, and contamination from whatever the floodwater carried through the area. Private wells that have been submerged need to be tested before use. Roads that have been underwater need to be inspected for undermining. The erosion of the material beneath the road surface that can make a road appear intact while it is structurally compromised. Columbia County. Health and Human Services is offering well water testing for affected residents. Testing information is available through Columbia County's website or by calling 608-742-9227. Officials in multiple counties are asking residents to monitor their local emergency management social media pages for updates specific to their communities as the water continues receding and the road-by-road assessment proceeds. For those in Shiocton, New London, Weyauwega, Fremont, and the Blackhawk neighborhood of Portage, the process of returning home, assessing damage, and beginning the cleanup will take weeks. The water level on the Wisconsin River dropped 19/100ths of a foot short of the all-time record and then began to recede. The margin was narrow. The levee held, the sandbagging worked, the evacuations happened before the windows closed. Not every flood emergency in Wisconsin's history has ended this way. The fact that this one did reflects preparation, response time, and the specific decisions made by emergency managers in the hours when the margins were still being determined. As of April 18th, the floodwaters are receding. Wisconsin emergency management remains active, and the communities that were evacuated are waiting to go home.